The thing we are told to chase is often a ghost that moves only when you let go of it. Happiness, most people assume, is something acquired, an achievement like promotion or relationship milestone. We believe happiness waits on the far side of enough money or sufficient connection. But this understanding builds a life defined by constant lack. It establishes a permanent gap between what we have and what we think we deserve. The anxiety that fills the space, the feeling that this moment is not quite good enough or that it will pass too quickly, is simply the anticipation of the next required source of fulfillment. If joy were merely an outcome, then our lives would be linear. Effort leads to reward, and happiness follows. But if we recognize this structure as fundamentally flawed, we must ask a different question entirely. We cannot wait for contentment. Perhaps it exists not as a destination at all, but only as the byproduct of attending to something else. The core philosophical challenge is not how to achieve lasting joy, but rather how to adjust our attention so that happiness becomes an ongoing state of being, rather than a fleeting prize. The traditional philosophy of ethics often approaches contentment from the outside. It is a virtuous end state, earned through disciplined action. Aristotle understood this well. He argued that human flourishing, or eudaimonia, is not merely feeling good. It is living in accordance with one's highest capabilities and reason. For him, true happiness came from realizing one's potential, specifically through thoughtful action and participation in the community. The key concept here is habit. We become happy by practicing habits that are inherently worthwhile: the skill of justice, the care of friendship, the pursuit of knowledge. To be happy was thus to live a life structured around excellence, always requiring effort, always demanding engagement with something harder than simple pleasure. But this Aristotelian framework risks becoming an exhausting mandate. It suggests that happiness is always a project, a perpetually unfinished self-improvement program. If fulfillment requires constant striving toward optimal virtue, does the quiet moment of genuine rest become inherently suspect? The philosopher Stoic Epictetus offers a necessary complication to this narrative of perpetual effort. He argued that true freedom, and thus tranquility, does not come from mastering your external circumstances or relentlessly optimizing your character. Rather, it comes from drawing a clear boundary around what is within your control and what lies outside it. We must learn to distinguish between our internal judgments and the actual events of the world. The things we fear losing, wealth, health, the approval of others, are largely controlled by other people or random chance. To build happiness on such shifting sand is always fragile. This pivot from striving toward virtue to practicing acceptance changes everything about where we place our focus. We are taught that satisfaction is a resource that must be constantly accumulated and defended. Epictetus asks us instead to recognize the limited nature of human agency. We only control how we assess reality, not reality itself. Happiness, in this sense, becomes less about achieving an optimal state and more about adjusting one's internal relationship to unavoidable discomfort. It is a radical act of mental triage, choosing what worries are truly necessary versus merely habitual anxieties. This does not lead to apathy, it leads to focus. It allows us to invest our energy in the immediate, tangible sphere. The conversation happening right now, the task before us, the body that requires simple movement. If we integrate these views, the active striving of Aristotle with the radical acceptance of Stoicism, we arrive at a practical architecture for daily life. Happiness is not found by making grand, sweeping changes to our career or our relationships. It resides in the minute points where effort and letting go meet. We must dedicate ourselves to meaningful action, yes, but we must simultaneously cultivate a deep appreciation for the unearned moment. This means treating skill acquisition as worthwhile, the dedication required to learn something difficult, but also recognizing that the greatest value often lies in simple awareness, noticing the light falling through a window pane or the specific weight of a cup in one's hand. It is the ability to sustain attention without needing it to lead somewhere spectacular. The thing we are told to chase is often a ghost that moves only when you let go of it. The paradox remains true because happiness resists definition by acquisition. We spend our lives believing fulfillment requires an external addition, a title, a trip, another connection. But the quiet work, the slow cultivation of attention towards what already exists, reveals that contentment is not earned at all. It is simply given back to us when we stop spending so much energy fighting the current moment. This means we are constantly misunderstanding what enough actually looks like. We treat enough like a fixed point on a graph, a destination that once reached will finally grant stability. But happiness isn't an end point. It's a practice of presence, a shift in how we allocate our internal resources. It requires us to accept the friction and the mundane moments not as obstacles blocking the path to joy, but as the very texture of life itself. The philosophy here moves away from grand narratives, the epic quest, the transformative breakthrough, and settles into the geometry of routine. If we train ourselves to find wonder in the predictability of the morning coffee, or the rhythmic pattern of walking through a familiar neighborhood, we are performing an act of radical defiance against our own cultural script. We are deciding that the sheer fact of being here, right now, is already enough material for profound contemplation. This isn't passive resignation. It's active resistance to the tyranny of expectation. It's about recognizing that the biggest shifts in perspective don't come with fanfare or a sudden epiphany under a mountain sky. They arrive when we are washing dishes, waiting for a light to change, or simply watching dust motes drift through the afternoon sunlight. These small moments become reservoirs of meaning. And so, if we take back the ability to sustain attention on the simple act, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the way the sunlight falls across the wooden floor, we reclaim something far more valuable than any external achievement, a stable relationship with ourselves. We learn that peace is not a grand prize waiting at the finish line. It's simply the steady state we inhabit when we finally stop looking for escape and start looking closer. Perhaps, just perhaps, happiness is less of a destination to be reached and more of the quiet, profound attention paid to one's own hand.